77 WABC, New York City, New York. This is War Room Pandemic, the New York City Special Report. It is Saturday, the 21st of March, the year of our Lord 2020, and we are live. This is episode 63, over 4 million downloads. We're also across the nation on John Fredericks Radio Network, America's Voice.News, the streaming platform of the Trump movement, also Newsmax TV, and throughout the world on Nexus and IRRS, on shortwave, medium wave, and AM. And later in the day, subtitled in Mandarin on G News for all of our followers, listeners, and viewers in mainland China. Okay. There's a gathering storm, and that gathering storm is in New York City. New York City has gone through 9/11. New York City has gone through the financial crisis of 2008, and now in 2020, it is prepared to face another one, the combination of a pandemic, an economic crisis, and a capital markets global financial crisis, of which New York City happens to be the global capital of the world of finance, and for good reason. In the tri-state area, the talent, dedication, and professionalism of those people that work in the capital markets is extraordinary. We're going to get to all that. We've got some breaking news. Mr. Jason, my two sidekicks, Jason Miller, my co-host on 2020, and Jack Maxey, who runs the War Room. We got some breaking news out of New Jersey?
We do. Governor Phil Murphy is going to be holding a special press conference at 1 p.m. It's expected that New Jersey will be joining New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, California, Illinois, and Oregon as essentially stay-at-home restrictions that are being put on, where folks will only be able to leave if they're going to a grocery store, to a pharmacy, a drugstore, something of that matter. This will mean that everybody is then staying home unless you have some sort of critical function, such as the police department, at a hospital, or working at said grocery store. And also we have New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's giving his update for New Yorkers and the state of New York's response to the coronavirus pandemic as we speak. We'll jump in.
You jump in on anything, any breaking news with Governor Cuomo, you break in right away. By the way, I worked with Phil Murphy for years at Goldman Sachs. He's a good man, solid guy. I want to turn now. We got a very special guest, and if you saw Laura Ingraham last night, I've wanted to get this guy on the show from the very beginning. Dr. William Grace, the head of oncology up at Lenox Hill Hospital. Dr. Grace, and by the way, a renowned, beloved physician and just a good man. On Laura Ingraham last night, we're going to talk about these therapeutics. I want to get to that in a second, Dr. Grace, but we had Mayor Giuliani on for the first hour, and we had him listen to and respond. There was the head of neurosurgery last night at Lenox Hill was it had, I think, an incredible interview last night about 9 o'clock on CNBC. CNBC did a summary show about the turbulence in the capital markets, but they finished with what's the pandemic situation in New York City. And Jason, if we could play one of the clips, and I want to have Dr. Grace respond to it.
Absolutely. And one thing, Steve, as well, we have Governor Cuomo is going through almost as if he's responding in real time, listing out here's what they're doing for increasing hospital capacity, building new beds, and says on the final Army Corps list today, Javits Center, SUNY Stony Brook, SUNY Westbury, Westchester Convention Center, also an increasing supplies.
Boy, if you listen to the first hour of the show, you'd be ahead of the curve here.
You would. It literally looks like Governor Cuomo is going through. But let me go and play.
But hey, before we get to that, one thing I want to listen, the three verticals we've done since January is to do the pandemic, to do the economic collapse, and do the financial crisis. But in doing the pandemic, the one thing we focus on very early, because the experts told us, is a thing called hospital exhaustion. And that's the gating event of emergency rooms, ICU units, PPE for the physicians and the teams of doctors and nurses. And one thing Mayor de Blasio did early on was to reach out for those retired physicians or nurses. I think I saw in the New York Post, 1,700 have answered the call. But this is why Cuomo, right now, the gating event is surge capacity for ICU units, hospital beds. This is why you've got the USNS Comfort coming up here. This is why the Army Corps of Engineers is now fully engaged with New York City to talk about this. This is what Mayor Giuliani was talking about. So the governor is addressing those issues right now. We'll get that to everybody in the 77 WABC audience. Let's play the clip and we'll get to Dr.
Yeah, this
Grace.
is Dr. John Bokvar from Lenox Hill Hospital.
Are you feeling better about the testing that we're doing now than you were days and even just a week ago?
Testing is only one component. What I think is absolutely necessary is the federal government's involvement with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Defense Production Act. We have 2 weeks to make a dent in this fight. This is a war. There should be a declaration of war at the federal level, starting in New York City, starting this weekend.
It's Dr. Grace, later he's talking about the surge capacity and the problem with the surge and all that. Can you give us a sense of Lenox Hill and the other city hospitals? Where do we actually stand today?
Yeah, not very well, but let me correct one thing. I am not the head of oncology at Lenox Hill Hospital. I am an oncologist at Lenox Hill Hospital, and I was for nearly 2 decades the former chief of cancer research and medical oncology at St. Vincent's in New York City, but I'm not in that position at Lenox Hill. But yes, talking to all my colleagues who are much deeper in the trenches than I am, both at Lenox Hill Hospital and at the other hospitals in New York City, they are getting very much overwhelmed. First of all, the city hospitals do not have contemporary PCR or rapid testing for COVID-19, and they take as long as 6 to 8 days to get the results. And so, when somebody comes in with with symptoms of COVID-19 or related illnesses, they have to assume it's COVID-19. So they exhaust a lot of protective devices. They exhaust a lot of bed space unnecessarily, because these patients, had we had rapid testing, could easily disappear into back to self-quarantine or other places, but they don't know that. At least at Columbia Presbyterian and their related hospitals, and at Lenox Hill Hospital, we have more rapid determinations of who is COVID-19 positive and who is not. But both institutions, despite the rapid ability to test for COVID-19, are running out of protective equipment for the employees. In fact, at Columbia, they are telling staff who have had symptoms of COVID-19 and who were supposed to be isolated for 2 weeks to come back after 3 days if they felt well enough. So we're getting to the point, at least at Columbia, where the sick might be taking care of the sick. And that's a tragic situation. They need help, and they need help fast, both in terms of staff. I've also heard at Columbia Presbyterian that they're asking retired doctors to come back, get in the trenches again, and start working, because they're running out of staff. And so that's a critical situation. It's not quite so bad at Lenox Hill Hospital, but everything that John Bakvar, who I consider a great friend and a truly skilled neurosurgeon, whatever he says is exactly right. And I couldn't emphasize that more.
Let me ask you, how do we get in this situation? How do we get in the situation? New York City has got, I think, in the world, some of the most world-renowned hospitals there. How are we about to hit the surge? The hurricane's about to come up on the beach in a couple of days. How are we in a situation where some of the finest, like the Columbia Presbyterian, Lenox Hill, these other hospitals, how is there not more coordination, at least for getting PPE, to get the protective equipment, to know that at Columbia Presbyterian, that the staff, which we've been warned from China to Italy to all over the world, that the key is to protect the hospital staff so that they can continue to work 72 hours straight, but not get the disease itself, not get the virus itself. How do we not have enough PPE for deployed?
I think that what's happened is the supply chain is used to a certain speed of supply, and all of a sudden you see now exponential increase in the speed that is necessary to supply these institutions, and they're not ready for that. And on top of that, China has been much of the equipment comes from China, and they have been not allowing these necessary devices in China to be exported to fill in the supply chain. And I think that's going to have long-term ramifications politically and health-wise.
Doctor, this is Jack Maxey, and the fact that you're an oncologist, I think, makes this question really interesting. One of the things that we're dealing with this virus, how do we isolate people who are already in hospitals who might be immunosuppressed or immunocompromised? For example, somebody who's going through, say, a chemotherapy. because we've read some things that they're talking about using the USNS Comfort as it comes up there as an overflow. Would there be a plan to move those immunosuppressed
I tell you what, just for our commercial thing, Dr. Grace, if you could hang over to the next commercial break, we'd appreciate it because I want to hear that answer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Dr. William Grace, one of the oncologists at Lenox Hill, former chief at St. Vincent's. He's going to be here on 77 WABC. We're going to take a short commercial break. A lot going on. Governor Cuomo's giving his press conference. We're going to update you with that. Please go to hashtag War Room Pandemic. We want to hear your voice. We want you to be a part of the show. We want to hear your observations, criticisms. Also go to the website warroom.pandemic.org. You can get 24/7 news. This is Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Maxey, Jason Miller. We're throughout the nation and the world on the show. John Fredericks Radio Network, on America's Voice, on Dish 219, Newsmax TV, throughout the world on Nexus.org and IRRS. We're going to return on 77 WABC from New York City in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
77 WABC War Room Pandemic, New York City special report, Saturday, the 21st of March, the year of our Lord 2020. We have breaking news out of California. What is it, Jack Maxey?
Well, in California, it looks like they're trying to understand how best to use these tests. And the reality is now, as we're seeing in New York, hundreds of people are showing up to be tested. And so they realize that they're losing PPEs doing these tests, and sometimes they're negative, sometimes they're positive. And the California hospitals are basically being told in Los Angeles to only test people if you think it's going to change your treatment regime or you think you're going to change how you're going to deal with that patient as an infected person within the community.
So they're stopping testing in LA is what you're telling me?
It's not that they're entirely stopping them. It's just that they're realizing that they're now treating symptoms rather than...
They're essentially stopping testing. What is the news coming from Cuomo?
Yeah, Governor Cuomo's making quite a bit of news here in his press conference, saying that they're sending 1 million N95 masks to New York City, 500,000 N95 masks going to Long Island, purchasing an additional 6,000 ventilators, gathering supplies. The other thing, too, I want to point out is that Governor Cuomo really running a masterclass, to use your terminology, Steve, on how to put together these press conferences. I mean, if you were listening to the first hour of the show here on WABC, War Room Pandemic, and the issues we talked about with the hospitals and Javits Center, literally Governor Cuomo has these, it looks a little bit like a 1992, Microsoft there, but it gets the job done. Building new beds, final Army Corps list today, Javits Center, SUNY Stony Brook, SUNY Westbury Westchester, Convention Center, going through all of these. Also, even getting real granular on here's where we're working with the federal government. Here is how they're testing more in New York than China or South Korea, the number of tests in New York versus California or Washington, but also just literally detailing everything out. I mean, this is a masterclass in sharing information, keeping people well informed. Very impressive from Governor Cuomo.
Very impressive. Jack, you want to go back to your question on Dr. William
Hey,
Grace?
Doctor, real quick again. What are the hospitals doing with the immunocompromised people who are, say, your oncology patients? How are we going to isolate them from this virus? And are there any discussions about turning the USNS Comfort into a place where we could isolate these people?
I think the hospital ship USS Comfort was going to be used for more standard hospital patients rather than isolation. They were going to use the land-based hospital beds for the COVID-19 outbreak. So I don't think that what happens is that there are other patients with other diseases, including cancer and other diseases where people are immunologically suppressed. But one of the things you have to realize here is there's a paradox in that the immune systems of people who are very young are very immature. That's why they get vaccinations. And as you get older, you get exposed to more and more external, threats. And so your immune system matures even though your body ages and maybe becomes weaker, but your immune system is not weaker. Thereby, many of the people who are dying from COVID-19 pneumonitis are dying from what we call in medicine a cytokine storm, where the immune system is basically goes crazy in fighting the virus and kills off a lot of healthy lung tissue. And so the way in which hydroxychloroquine works is not only in some of its more well-documented, prevention of the prevention of replication of the virus, but also it is an immunosuppressive agent. That's why it's used in rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and other inflammatory states to cool down the immune system. So it's felt that it probably works in two ways: as a checkpoint against the cytokine storm, and two, as its ability to inhibit replication of the virus.
Doctor, I've taken chloroquine myself for as long as I've taken it for myself as long as 2 months over in Africa, and this has got to be one of the most heavily prescribed medicines in the history of medicine, right? I mean, well over billions of dosages given out over the last 50 years. It's highly safe. Why do you think the delay in the FDA providing a little uplands sunlight for people on this? Why do you think they're being so harsh? Because the stuff I'm reading out of South Korea and maybe even in Japan seem to imply that they're getting great use out of it.
Yes, you'll see that articles in China, there was a randomized 100-person trial. There was a trial in Japan and in South Korea. And, of course, the most recent and most exciting data coming out of Marseille, France, where the combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin managed to get 100% of the patients disease-free, I mean, literally virus-free in 5 days. And the significance, and again, this data was weighted against the success of the treated group. There were more men in the treated group and do worse. There were more older people in the treated group, and the older people do worse. And there were more people in the treated group with pneumonia in the lungs. And in spite of that, the people who got the combination therapy did remarkably well, so well that the significance is that there was less than one chance in 10,000 that the data was there by chance alone. And as you know, in medicine today, we use one chance in 20 for statistical significance, but chances of less than one chance in 10,000 is an extraordinary outcome. That's why these doctors published this work, because they thought it was morally imperative to save lives. You know, in a perfect world, you would have a nice randomized trial and everybody would digest it, after 4 or 5 or 6 months when it would eventually appear in the New England Journal of Medicine. But they wanted this out there now because they thought it would save lives. And my experience is that in New York, it is going to save lives, and the combination may save many more lives.
Real quick, we got 30 seconds. Are you recommending today we just put this into the system and let people take a shot at this?
Yeah, I recommended last night on Laura Ingraham that basically those people who have very life-threatening illness should be on this medication, and those people who are not so sick should be put onto randomized controlled trials because they have really no risk and a lot to learn from the randomized trials that Dr. Fauci wants to have.
Dr. William Grace from the Oncology Department of Lenox Hill Hospital. Sir, thank you very much. You're an American hero and an American patriot. Really appreciate you coming on 77 WABC this morning.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Okay, this is 77 WABC. We're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to come back. We've got lots of breaking news. We're also going to talk more about the solution in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
77 WABC, the 45th President of the United States says nothing is inevitable. That means through human action and human agency, we will get through this. It's Saturday, the 21st of March, year of our Lord, 2020. This is episode 63 of War Room Pandemic, and this is our New York City special report brought to you by the good folks at 77 ABC for the tri-state area. More breaking news. Did Larry Kudlow listen to Jason Trennert and riff off him? We got breaking news on Larry Kudlow, the National Economic Council chairman.
Well, I think so. Larry Kudlow said this morning outside the White House there that the coronavirus stimulus package will be more than $2 trillion. And when a reporter noted that 10% would be more than $2 trillion, he added that's correct. So Kudlow was saying that the size of the package would be approximately 10% of the country's GDP.
It's exactly what Trennert said.
Exactly what Trennert said this morning.
He said, hey, we need something that's at least 10%. The nation's $22 trillion. You need 10% to bridge it.
This is good. Just to make clear to everybody, this is good. We have to go big here. We have to go large. I mean, this is such a fundamental hit.
The president has been saying he wants to go big. I think what happened when they got into this thing, the $1.1 trillion was just never going to do it. It doesn't bridge the drop in aggregate demand. And we're going to try to get Jim Schultz from who was at the White House counsel's office, who's an expert in all these orders, these executive orders, these national emergency orders, all these orders you're seeing now at the governor level in New Jersey, in Connecticut, in New York State, also for the mayor, also for the federal government, to kind of make some sense of it, how it's supposed to flow. Our producer, Vish Burr, is going to get Jim a call-in number so that we can get him on the line. Look, we call a lot of audibles here, and the reason is this story's breaking. We're trying to get you the best thinking around there so that you can look at the pandemic, you can look at the economic crisis, you can look at the financial crisis on top of that, how they converge together. But I think that's a very important announcement out of the White House today on Kudlow. First off, I think part of it is driven by the Wall Street Journal's editorial. That there's got to be a little more clarity. You got to show people that if you're going to go through this pandemic and now you're kind of shutting down these businesses, a little bit happenstance, maybe not an all one thing or shut the country down, but in happenstance, you're literally by proclamation taking aggregate demand down, right? Maybe not to zero, but pretty close to it, right? So therefore, you have to have a bridging mechanism that gets you to the other side of that. We just can't have people in New York City and throughout the country, particularly the job creators, the entrepreneurs, these people that have the dry cleaners or the yoga studios or all these services that we have that just go to zero. Jack, jump in here.
Donald Trump has just announced another press conference today at 12:30. Perhaps he's listening as well, Steve.
Well, I'm sure he'd listen to Governor Cuomo's, and that's why it's very important, I think, for the president to come up here. I think it's very, very, very important. I just hope it's power moves that we're going to see, because you see things in L.A. where they're stopping to test right now. It shows you. Look in New York City, and we're just reporting what the professionals are saying, that this thing's getting ahead of people, right? And one of the big gating events that we've talked for weeks and weeks and weeks is PPE, the personal protective equipment for the hospital staffs. Remember, one of the key things here, you got to have surge capacity in ventilators. You have to have surge capacity in ICU units. But also the key ingredient is the doctor nurses teams that service you. And to have someone as renowned as Dr. William Grace from Lenox Hill, from the oncology department, and a renowned guy in New York City, to sit there and say Columbia Presbyterian, one of the finest hospitals on the face of the earth, that the people went home thinking they had it, and they've come back because the staff is so short. That's where you start exacerbating problems. And that's going to happen all over New York City. This is what happened in Italy. Look, the highest casualty rates in this pandemic in China, in Wuhan, and in northern Italy have been the doctors and nurses, right? Because they're working 48 and 72 hours in this protective equipment. Go back and look in Wuhan. They were in hazmat suits, right? The hero of Wuhan, Dr. Lee, the one who actually broke the story and told the nation that they had a SARS breakout and was tortured, suppressed, and made to sign a rumor monger. He's a rumor monger by the CCP, which means on social credit he would get to do zero. Kids wouldn't get to school or anything. Then they realized that they suppressed him. He's the truth. He went back to the hospital. He volunteered and went back and died 2 weeks later because he caught the disease, because he made a mistake on his protective gear. He admitted. He said he got sloppy. He got inattentive on a patient. That was asymptomatic. That's how deadly this thing is. I want to go back though with Dr. Grace. He had to jump. He's so busy. But Jack, you've really gotten up the curve with Dr. Hatfield in this. Walk people through what he said on Laura last night. What did he say today, and where do we stand there? Because I'm kind of confused. I keep hearing from the mainstream media, there's not data out there, there's not studies out there, there's none of that out there. And yet this thing obviously works.
Well, I think that what the president should probably do is come out and talk about the thing that he did 2 years ago when he said, look, if somebody's dying of cancer, we are not going to make them jump through FDA hoops if there is an experimental drug out there that they think might help, because that's a personal end-of-life decision, and you're going to take that chance if you can. Now, the same thing should be done with chloroquine, in my opinion. Now, there may be issues with supply that are reducing the government's willingness to describe this the way that many other healthcare professionals around the world are describing it. The doctor referenced last night on Laura Ingraham, and again today, a study that was done just very recently in southern France. 26 patients, a large demographic, and they all recovered. Now, it seems to me, this is Jack Maxey talking, that the Hippocratic Oath is first, do no harm. Well, we know because billions of dosages of this have been given out over the last 60 years in the treatment of malaria, and in more recent decades in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis and other immunocompromised diseases, that this is relatively benign. There are certain people who may have heart arrhythmia that might be affected negatively by this, but it seems to me that in this crisis, if there is a drug that may have even the ability to suppress the virus partially, it would make sense, particularly on a compassionate basis to the sickest individuals.
Okay, this is going to be back up on our site, too, so we want people to get all over this. We're going to have much more of this in the days ahead. Jason, get anything jump in, because I'm going to bring in Jim Schultz in a second. Okay, here's what we got. And look, we call audibles. We ride to the sound of the guns here on 77 WABC as we cover this story. So much news is breaking. We try to make sure we're focusing on the signal and not the noise. One of the things we want to do, Jim Schultz is one of the partners down at Cogs's law firm in Philadelphia, but he was one of the senior lawyers in the White House counsel's office in the first couple of years of President Trump's presidency, and an expert in the state of Pennsylvania, kind of ran these emergency measures. Jim, thank you very much for joining us in 77 WABC.
Happy to be on, Steve.
Okay, there's just a lot of confusion out there. The president put out a national emergency proclamation, or called it 10 days ago or a week ago Friday. Last night they put these emergency measures that coordinate FEMA. The Army Corps of Engineers has been called out for technical support. Governor Murphy in New Jersey is going to have another proclamation or have a press conference to declare, I think, another either lockdown or a shelter in place. Can you walk the audience through, just because you did this in Pennsylvania, just what the federal government does and how it relates to the states and then how it relates to the city?
I think it's really important, Steve, that these governors, as they're rolling out these proclamations, one, they don't have to roll back some of the provisions right away, because on afterthought, folks are calling in and saying, look, you're killing my business here, and I supply a critical area that's going to help this problem, right? Everybody recognizes that there needs to be some flexibility here, but businesses need some certainty, because there's major penalties that go along sometimes with some of these proclamations if you're not abiding by the stay-in-place orders. So we've seen in Pennsylvania and New York and New Jersey and California a number of different approaches being taken and a number of different standards being applied. And there are national businesses that provide a lot of services to all these various states and have to adjust to the states accordingly. And sometimes at the county level. For instance, in California, before the statewide order hit, each county was doing its own thing. They were somewhat similar, but there were stuff that impacted a company's ability to do business in one county versus another county. And businesses need certainty, and this confusion is not helpful to the process here. Because folks, for instance, that supply the water industry with bottles and cans and things like that, they need to remain open because they're supplying an essential business. And keeping that chain of supply, running is so vitally important as we're trying to deal with this issue.
How is this being coordinated? By the way, I might want to add, Jim Schultz is also a contributor at CNN. You see him there all the time. Jim, in your professional, the one you did it in Pennsylvania, are these orders being clear enough now between the federal government, New York State, the city, Pennsylvania, New Jersey? Is this something that you can make a little clearer to our audience?
I think what the state governments need to do, and now they're starting to catch on, is take a look at the DHS guidance in terms of what essential businesses are and what critical businesses are. And follow that DHS guidance, because that gives you some measure of consistency across the board about who can remain open, who can remain in process, it remain working. And the purpose for this is to serve the problem that we're dealing with, right? It's to supply those critical areas. And governors need to be cognizant of that when they're drafting these memos. I've been inundated at Cogs and O'Connor for the past week for questions from the business community on how to interpret these various orders and asking for legal opinions on how to deal with the various states and the various issues. And we've been, the National Governors Association and the work that Governor Hogan's been doing is very good, because they've been trying to get the message out that consistency is necessary. And Andrew Cuomo in New York has been doing a good job at kind of keeping his state consistent, that the state is going to drive this and not the particular municipalities and counties.
Jim Schultz from CNN, formerly the White House Counsel's Office, thank you very much for joining us today on 77 WABC War Room Pandemic.
Thanks, Steve.
I want to go back to you, Jack. You brought this up the other day when the proclamation came out from Governor Cuomo. The first thing we heard, it was a lockdown of the state, or it was a shelter in place. Cuomo came out, was very specific, but then Jack showed me the proclamation. I think there were 12 categories you had of what was considered essential businesses, right? And I kind of sat there and said, well, they seem pretty essential if you want to keep up daily life. So I think that's what the clarity needs to be. And I think Governor Murphy this afternoon on at 1 o'clock in New Jersey, we'll have to see what that one is, because I think there is a little bit of confusion about what's actually technically going on.
And remember, we talked about it with our guys yesterday and mentioned it briefly on the show. We have a bunch of people around the country who keep us informed about things that are going on, and we talked to some people in Texas and Florida. And, of course, there was the Wall Street Journal article. I think one thing that is critical that the federal government needs to coordinate with the states is transportation, particularly truck transportation. These guys are finding that certain states are shutting down rest areas, that they go to a big truck stop, they don't want to let them use the bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. They're finding it, depending on who they're making the delivery to, they don't want them to get out of the truck, they don't want this or that. There should be some standard so that road transportation can continue to move around this country, cross state lines, and provide the critical supplies, both food and medical and otherwise, that the country needs to operate. That's my opinion.
I want to go for a second, we'll turn back to something. We've only got one more segment left in the show. President Trump has announced, I take it at noon, or is it 12:30, he's going to have a press conference?
It's now going to be 12:30. When he yesterday said we'll be back tomorrow, so I'm expecting this will be day number 9 of President Trump at the podium in the Brady briefing room.
Bedard of the Washington Examiner had an interesting piece up late last night that talked about folks in the White House were working on the potential for a national shutdown, right? A national lockdown, not just do it piecemeal. California, because now you got 6 of the 7 biggest states. You just don't Florida and Texas. I might also add the 2 run by Republican governors. Bedard, talk to me about Bedard. Why is that important? Why did that get the interest of Steve Bannon and Jason Miller in the middle of the night?
So Paul Bedard, he broke this at 7:30 p.m. and the story, it's Washington Secrets, which is he has a lot of kind of breaking scoops, a lot of inside baseball, a lot of kind of developments here in the Beltway with the Washington Examiner, and the headline is breaking: Trump eyes 2-week quarantine, only drug and grocery stores open. Now, if you go and take a look at Drudge at the very top, it then received a second from the top link to Drudge.
Funny how that works.
Paul Bedard is someone who I definitely classify as being very friendly to the administration. This also feels very much to me like a trial balloon.
But Bedard is known as a platform they use when they want to raise it up the flagpole and see who salutes, right? It's a trial balloon. He does this on occasions, things they're working on. They test market it this way.
Put it this way: if this had been, say, the Washington Post or New York Times, the tone and presentation of it would have been completely different. It would have been packaged up with, contrary to what President Trump has said previously, it would have had the snark, it would have had the blind quotes, all that kind of thing. The fact this is out there without any blowback or brushback feels like a trial balloon. And I think people are, look, here's the reality. This is where we're going.
77 WABC, Stephen K. Bannon, Jason Miller, Jack Maxey in the War Room. We're going to return in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
77 WABC, War Room Pandemic, New York City Special Report. What makes New York City special, the tri-state area special, the United States of America special, it's its grit and determination. As Donald Trump says, nothing is inevitable. It's human action and human agency. We are not here to pat you on the head and tell you it's going to be fine. Here's how it's going to be fine. You put your shoulder to the wheel, and we're going to grind through this. When you're going through hell, the best thing to do is go through it as fast as possible. And that's what I think you're seeing now with Governor Cuomo, Mayor de Blasio, as things are coming together. Yes, this situation, there's going to be some issues. We're going to have some tough days ahead of us. But this country's had tough days ahead of it a lot of times, and you get through this. Look in just the 21st century, 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, and now the pandemic, the CCP Wuhan virus. The CCP Wuhan virus. We're going to get much more on that over the next week. I want to thank the folks at 77 ABC, and I do want to turn back to something, Jason. We're getting ready for the 12:30 presidential or the press conference from the White House. 77 WABC, I'm sure, will be covering that. I want to go to Melania Trump because I think what she gave is she will pat you on the head, right? And she should. She's the first lady. She's very inspirational, and I think this PSA was very moving. Can we play that?
Yep, here we go.
Today, I want to speak with you about coronavirus and what it means for you and your family. While changes need to be made now, this is not how we will live forever. Our children will return to school, people will return to work, we will gather at the places of worship, concerts, and sporting events again. I urge you to stay connected to loved ones through the video chats, phone calls, social media, and other safe technologies. Please be sure to follow CDC guidelines, which can be found at coronavirus.gov or cdc.gov, along with other information and resources. Stay safe. And remember, while many of us are apart, we are all in this together.
Very inspirational. Jack, I want to talk about how we're going to put up more information about what Dr. William Grace is talking about, this whole issue with this malarial drug. Summarize what we're going to put up so people are going to look at it themselves.
There are 4 studies concerning this that have come out over the last couple of years. One of them is more than a decade old. It's really a study of how they used chloroquine all the way back in the first SARS issue. So we're going to put all of these up. I think maybe what we'll do is put them up through the Twitter feed so you can see them directly with links to the studies and have, you as American citizens, global citizens, can make up your own minds. This is a perfect example that government is not going to save us all the time. Human agency and your own logic can play a role here in making you and your community safe.
Also, we consider ourselves the show for the deplorables. We know we're all over the country. We're now all over the world. One thing I want to make sure people understand, just because its epicenter now is Seattle and New York City, in San Francisco and some in California, don't think it's not in your place. All these people say it's not here. It's just you're not testing. This is everywhere, okay? This pandemic is everywhere. Maybe not as intense as some of these central hot zones, right? But it will spread out. That's why it's got to be dealt with. When you're going through hell, go through as fast as possible. Jason Miller, any closing comments, observations?
Yeah, just want to remind folks here on WABC that Mayor Giuliani will be hosting between 4 and 5 p.m. on Monday, followed by War Room Pandemic at 5. We're going to have Bernie Carrick joining us on Monday.
That's fantastic. Okay. Hashtag War Room Pandemic throughout the day. We want you to participate in the show. Also, warroom.pandemic.org is the website. Greg Manns, Kyle Obert, Jack Maxey, and others running that 24 hours a day. We want your comments. We want your observations. We want you to be part of this. We got to go through this together. So let's line up and go through it. The coming surge, the coming hurricane is going to hit New York City coming this week. See you on Monday.